and welcome to this live stream. Greetings, overworld. It is I, Phantom Ender, with my new chibi model. Thank you so much to Munyaz on Twitter for making this for me. It's super freaking cute, and I love it so much. Oh my god! Ah! Anyway, let me go ahead and show you all the different stuff I could do with this model. Hold on, one sec. Zoom in. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I know. Big chibi. Anyway, I got some different expressions and stuff to show you guys, so let's go ahead and cycle through them. No talk. Me angry. I am angry. Do not mess with me when I am angry. And then we got sad. Oh no. Somebody took the last cookie. I wanted to eat that cookie. That sucks. And then we got... no. It's so scary. I don't like it. It's terrifying. Ah! I love the little tear details Munoz added. It makes me so happy. Ah! But yes, I am super stoked with this new little model. It is absolutely adorable, and I cannot wait to use it for today's stream and tomorrow's stream. So you guys get the new model early. Yay! Woohoo! Anyway, let me shrink back down the size. Yee! Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and watch some game theory videos today because it's just a theory, a game theory. Plus, I was gonna do Metopia, but I had to run out of the witch's house to do some tasks that were very important because, as I said, on Tuesday, I'm gonna be out of commission next week because I have a surgery I'm doing next week, and it's very important. So next week is gonna be recovery, and maybe the week after that I'll be back to streaming. We'll play it by ear. But for now, let's just have fun watching some game theories, and then tomorrow we'll be playing Metopia. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, switching layers. Hey! Look, I'm almost as big as Jingle now. Yay! Alrighty, so we're gonna be watching... The first two game theories we're gonna be watching is the Game Theory FNAF Ultimate Timeline. And this is part 1. And then after this part, we'll be watching part 2. So let's go ahead and get started.
Today we end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8 whole years, all leading to this moment. The ultimate FNAF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss back together. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that feels like a kid revealing the class project that he's been working on all year. Except here, it's the class project that I've been working on for the past decade of my life. This one is big, my friends, and I gotta admit, kinda nervous. I haven't attempted a timeline video on this franchise since 2018. Back in the days when Mike was the crying child, Afton coming back was actually a surprise, and Fazgoo wasn't a phrase I'd ever thought I'd have to utter. But since the last time I did something like this, we've had 3 more massive games, the death and revival of the FNAF movie, more robot kids than you can...
Quick note, I am super excited for the FNAF movie, especially because Jim Henson Studios is working on the animatronics, and oh my god, it's like they had a miniature 3D sculpt in one of the pictures that they showed that Blumhouse shared, and oh my god, it looks so good. Oh, I'm so excited! Also, Matthew Lillard is Purple Guy, aka William Afton. I'm so excited. Can you tell I like FNAF?
and shake a staff bot at. It is exhausting trying to keep track of this whole franchise, which honestly is why I'm here today. The lore at this point is complicated.
Pause 1 second. There we go.
It is full of speculation and theory, so to hopefully make it a little easier for everyone and to give us all a baseline to talk about this franchise moving forward into the future, it's time to reveal my current working FNAF timeline. But just before I do, I just want to explain a couple of things. First, this timeline is massive. Seriously, it is huge. This thing towers over any video project we have ever done on the channel. But when you look at the totality of this franchise, the story of FNAF really boils down to the story of one man, William Afton. His successes, his failures, his his rise to becoming co-owner of one of the most successful restaurant franchises in the world, and his eventual fall to the monsters he helped to create, only to then be reborn in a new digital form later. That's why I've decided to split this timeline into 3 main chunks: the foundation of Freddy's, how the business started and how it came into being; the Afton era, William's decades-long murder spree; and post-Purple Guy, basically modern FNAF, everything that happens after the pizzeria simulator fire. And because there are lots of new big revelations in this thing that seemingly come out of nowhere, as well as just points I want to talk about further, I decided to dedicate 1 episode to each chunk. I originally wanted it to be one seamless, continuous video, but it just felt incomplete without some sort of explanation at the end of each one. Once the
would have been an hour of animation. Oof.
this whole thing's done, I promise I'm gonna merge all the narrative bits into one massive video so you can just skip my explanations. But for now, this just felt like the best, most satisfying, most complete way to do this. That being said, this is still about the story, the broad strokes of the franchise. So in order to make sure that you guys know that I'm not just pulling answers out of thin air, not only am I discussing some of the more controversial bits at the end of each chunk, we're also putting in a handy little graphic in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will show thumbnails, video titles, books, and any other citations that we need throughout the video. So if you wish to understand that specific statement in more detail, you know exactly where we've taken it from. That way you can look into those details for yourself. So sit back, grab some popcorn, or your pitchforks if you're the type to get upset when I say something controversial, and make sure that you subscribe, since this is going to be a video that you're going to want to come back to a few times in order to fully dissect. Without any more waiting, I present to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness, and along the way discovered the secret to eternal life. Our story begins not in the 1980s, or even in the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah, one of the states hit hardest, 4th highest unemployment in the nation, and full of transients. People looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired and they were hungry, but as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits: a simple roadside attraction called Fredbear's Singin' Show. The ads were plastered all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in the popular pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop. It immediately said that this, Fredbear's, was a place where you could bring the family. And the price, honestly, couldn't be beat. For 50 cents, you could get food and entertainment as you watched the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you only got to see dancing bears at large traveling circuses like Barnum and Bailey, where the tickets would go for about $1. That's $1 without food. But this was a smaller show, like the type from the Vaughn brothers or the Robbins brothers, where tickets would sell for just a mere 50 cents. Watching that bear do tricks on stage brought a glimmer of joy at a time when so much was wrong with the world. The simple show would go on for years, bringing happiness to hundreds of travelers passing through looking for a quick meal. But it left a permanent impression on one little boy, capturing his imagination in a way that nothing else had. One little boy named Billy. That was his nickname at least, but his parents liked to call him William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William dreamed of recreating that moment of bringing a musical bear to life, but how? William was smart, without a doubt, and he had a keen mind for business, but he wasn't the most creative. How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary costumes. William was inspired by the work of Walt Disney, who throughout the 50s and 60s was pioneering the use of mascot suits throughout his theme park. The big innovation? Suits with 5 fingers. This allowed the performers wearing the suits to use their natural arms and hands to interact with the guests, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally, with a simple mascot suit, he would be able to realize his childhood dream. He would be able to bring Fredbear to life. To appeal to the kids, and for copyright reasons, he changed Fredbear from a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But feeling like one character wasn't enough, he added another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because that was his. It was an original character that he had created from scratch. And I do mean scratch. William's hand-sewn costumes were rough, with seams and stitches visibly showing, but it was the best that he could do. And you know what? It was just enough. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small but enthusiastic crowds. Finally, he was able to deliver fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted in its...
Hello, Kit Ken. Thank you. I appreciate the hydrate. Hydrate complete. And yes, we will definitely have a nice stream. Nice, chill, and relax.
Inspired so many years ago, and things could have ended there. That could have been the end to his story. It could have been perfect had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea and they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal characters. His idea, except they did it better. William may have been the first, but obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it, but this restaurant was able to do the thing that he always wanted to do: make the animals actually come to life. All of the performers in this restaurant were robots, simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs, but all of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own, no human required. It was like magic that came from the mind of a brilliant creator named Henry Emily. This Henry, in some small way, had been able to harness the power of life itself. Afton admired him. He was jealous, to be sure, but he also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's Party World was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, a hippo known to ramble on and on. That one was more of a joke for the parents, but it was the main stage that was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken thing with a southern drawl was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken.
Editor's note: whether Chica was the original stage performer, however, an undamaged render doesn't exist.
Thing with a southern drawl named Chica, backed by a band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a banjo, an upbeat frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent. Wait, a bear? But bears were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse? Something to fit the country theme a bit better. Why did it have to be a bear? And adding insult to injury, they had the nerve to call this thing Ned Bear, a direct copy of his own Fred Bear.
Whoops, that's gonna leave a mark.
No, that was not okay. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness. A bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's Party World over Fred Bear's. William just couldn't compete with the appeal of the robots. Eventually, his restaurant would go bankrupt, only to get bailed out by, of course, Henry Emily. Another insult, another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget.
No talk, he angry.
1979. Despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was a period of massive success and expansion. With the two franchises now merged into one, it was the best of both worlds. Afton's ideas with Henry's robotic expertise. The two men decided to launch under a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans in performing suits as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as a brand and because he was the original performing animal mascot. Afton appreciated that. This new restaurant would also see a mix of characters as the two franchises merged into one, with Pig Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. And as part of this one big Fredbear family, they even got themselves official merch that were released, ranging from masks to magnets.
The crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet?
That said, not all the characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre, so they faded away into the dumpster, storage units, and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if and when a headliner went out of commission. Others, though, would fare much better, like a new Pirate Fox, as well as a blue guitar-playing variant of the yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big, it would spawn its own cartoon show, Fredbear and Friends. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong that they would be able to support the Fredbear's Family Diner franchise all on their own, while also spinning off a new sister location dedicated to their friends. In 1983, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters: Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good, and Afton was happy, mostly. It did bother him that the one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in that cartoon show. The only character in the roster of regulars to get ignored for the show, but other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, 2 sons, a daughter, he had a thriving business, and best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from the man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do. Because it was quick and easy, new characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of his signature animatronics for that character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinged or sliding jaw design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with the kids? What if his mascot suits could become animatronics? What if you could use more than just rigid metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that would give the animatronics fluidity and flexibility while still providing structure? The possibilities for this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability to control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning his way to an engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit it out loud, one other thing that kept pushing him forward was the desire to beat his former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable,
stupid.
to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 1 of the story. That said, at the end of each of these chunks, I want to break down some of the logical leaps that I made, since the more narrative format doesn't give me much of a chance to justify a lot of the big decisions. And admittedly, there are some large leaps in here. Let's just start off with Fredbear's Singin' Show, shall we? We know, based on the retro poster that was hidden in Security Breach, that at least at one point, Fredbear was an actual bear. And like I called out in that narrative segment, dancing bear shows were a real form of entertainment. The only problem is that, timing-wise, none of our main characters would be the people in charge of that business in the 30s and a series of pizza restaurants in the 80s without them just being extremely old. Best case scenario, if Afton's running the Singin' Show when he's 18, that still puts him at nearly 70 when the first pizzeria opens and his murder spree begins. That just doesn't make a lot of logical sense because he doesn't become immortal until his first death in Springtrap. That's why I suspect that Fredbear's Singin' Show was either a family business that Afton then carried on to a new generation, or something that he saw as a kid and just wanted to recreate when he grew up. The Fredbear Singin' Show thing also starts laying the groundwork for some of the core elements of the story, that Freddy's was a place of fantasy and fun, and that Afton, despite eventually falling to become the heartless serial killer and mad scientist that we know him as, began as someone with good intentions and a love of entertaining kids. He wanted to bring things to life from the very beginning, a theme that recurs a lot for him throughout the rest of the franchise. Next up, let's talk about those mascot costumes. One thing that I keep going back to is the design of Glitch Trap. It's a handcrafted suit. You can see the seams and everything. It even has 5 fingers for the performer's hands. It is very much not a Springtrap suit. This is something much more rudimentary. It came at a time before animatronics were a part of the story. That's why I suspect that it was actually the first, predating literally everything. It's also a suit that is very personal to Afton. He put his digital consciousness in that form. It's his personal avatar. It's the way that he sees himself. There's also a whole separate discussion to be had here about the habits and rituals of serial killers. So the fact that he's choosing to lure kids and kill them in this particular suit actually says a lot about his emotional attachment to it. So while Fredbear seems to have started as someone else's creation, Golden Bonnie was uniquely Williams, giving him a personal connection. And that's not all. In this whole franchise, only one set of characters have themselves 5 fingers, the Nightmares. Even Golden Freddy, Fredbear was a 5-fingered wearable suit at one point in the story, as we see in this shot from the graphic novel, before he, like everyone else, was turned into an animatronic. This seems to imply that all of the main characters had similar wearable mascot outfits at least at one point in time, and that whoever is having the FNAF 4 nightmares, if they even are nightmares, something that we'll touch on in part 2, saw those mascot suits specifically. Lastly, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The literal elephant, Orville Elephant, as well as the rest of the mediocre melodies. For a while now, I've suspected that the mediocre melodies played a much more important role in the story than just being a bunch more animatronics to fill out the roster. Especially Ned Bear, which is just so suspiciously close to Fredbear. And yet, there are 2 key details that we're gonna have to justify with any mediocre melodies mention. One, they're very rudimentary with external battery packs, implying that they come very early in the timeline. And 2, we know that, at minimum, Mr. Hippo does eventually become an official member of the extended Freddyverse. But if these things are supposed to be cheap, generic rip-offs, why would you be trying to rip off yourself? You wouldn't. You would be stealing someone else's ideas. So if Afton created Fredbear, there would have to be some rival franchise. The only other person who would likely be ripping him off? Henry. We've talked extensively about how the mediocre melodies are clearly Henry's design aesthetic, so it just has to be him. I don't think Henry's doing this maliciously. He doesn't strike me as the type. He was likely building the robots at the orders of someone else that was running a rival restaurant franchise. But that's enough motivation to start Afton down a path of jealous rivalry, but also begrudging admiration. As the Freddy Files Ultimate Edition says, it's important to revisit the beginning of Henry and William's relationship, so here you go. I think this is where it begins. Also, this is future Matt Pat here coming back to add this one in. Seems like the recently released character encyclopedia has backed up all of this speculation. I've had this timeline written for about a month now, but I've also been holding off a bit to see what wrenches this character encyclopedia might throw into it. And on this particular point, I gotta say, it seems like we might actually have nailed it. They actively call out the suspicious similarities to the main Fredbear crew. Quote from one of the pages: Ned Bear looks like an imitation, altered just enough to avoid copyright issues. I don't know about you, but that seems to imply that we were right on the money. Knowing all of this, at one point the franchises had to have merged. That's really the only way that you get Mr. Hippo from the rival franchise as part of the Fazbear crew. This also mirrors a lot of what happened in the real-life history of Chuck E. Cheese, with two rival restaurants, each with their own casts of characters, merging to become one unified brand. Again, we've gone into that in detail with other videos, just wanted to remind you all of that here. But why would I call out the rival restaurant as being named Chica's Party World? Few things, actually. First, we know for a fact that a location named Chica's Party World exists. It is mentioned in the source code teasing sister location.
Yep.
So it is out there somewhere and doesn't fit cleanly anywhere. Second, in the story The Puppet Carver, Chica is very explicitly looped in with the book versions of Pig Patch and Ned Bear, implying that she started as a mediocre melody. Thirdly, her design just fits better with the theme of down-home country animals with southern accents playing the banjo and eating with bibs. And with her being the headliner of the show with her name on the restaurant, it would make sense then that when the restaurants merged, she was the one that was added to the main cast of characters while all the other mediocres faded away. It's also why when Freddy's closes after William's killing spree, she's the one to branch back off into her old franchise and is therefore missing in sister location, a detail that's bothered me for years at this point. It might also explain why William decided to stuff his first dead kid into Chica. That one was Henry's creation, not his. Is all of this a big leap? Yeah. Is it connecting a lot of dots that are very spread out across the franchise that I've been holding on in the back of my mind for years? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense. It also serves as a clean answer to a lot of the random threads that Scott's been leaving dangling for years. So with all of that in mind, my friends, we can close the book on the foundation of Freddy's. And don't worry, next week I'll be back to give you arguably one of the most confusing parts of this entire timeline situation, part 2, the Afton era. I promise it will actually be next week this time. No more waiting around. I am just as eager to get this one out the door as you are to watch it. I promise. You know what else I promise? I promise that we'll actually get to talking about the games. I would have liked to have talked about them in this episode, but there just isn't that much in the games that helps us depict anything pre-Family Diner. Although, let's be honest, this franchise has never been just about the games anyway. Even back in the early days of FNAF, we were decoding images and source code that Scott fed us through the website. The modern day books and the clues that we get from those things, now they're just modern extensions of that. All of it is crucial to understanding this franchise and its lore. Unless, of course, Steel Wool finally gets around to making that Fredbear's Family Diner game they want to make so badly.
I've always would love to do is get kind of back to, I have no clue if we'll ever be able to do this, but getting back to kind of...
He has an Oswald plushie in the background. Look at it. Look. Ah! He's on the same shelf as Vanny. Hell yeah. Oswald. Woo! Walt Disney's original creation before Mickey Mouse in 1927.
like the origin of like Fazbear Entertainment or the origin of Freddy Fazbear.
But in the meantime, while we wait for that inevitably cryptic game, I hope that this start to the timeline helps to fill in some of those gaps. I'm excited to share part 2 with you next week.
Well, we don't have to wait next week because it's already out.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, and officially page 7 of the FNAF timeline script. Last time we covered the origins of Freddy's. We talked about William Afton's childhood dream project of making a singing bear come to life, and the infuriating moment that his dream is copied by a rival restaurant franchise looking to steal away his success. The merger of the two franchises results in William meeting Henry, a brilliant designer with a knack for robotics. Working together, they make Fredbear's flourish, spawning popular Saturday morning cartoon shows, toy lines, and spin-off restaurants under the Fazbear name. When last we left him, Afton was thriving, the world of robotics opening his eyes to new and exciting ways of bringing characters to life. Bringing things to life, yeah, that was his core driving force, his passion. And it was this very passion that would mutate, twist, and morph from here on out in the story. Because with life, there is inevitably death, something that Afton would become intimately familiar with. But before Afton acquaints himself with death, I want you to take...
Yes, I know, style theory. For now, I am skipping it.
Get dark in a hurry. 1983. Business was booming with 2 whole restaurant franchises running, Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Together, William and Henry had been able to take the hybrid suit idea and make it into a reality. They called their new invention the Springlock suit, and fittingly enough, it was symbolic of the partnership between these two men, a human suit as designed by William that could become a freestanding Henry-style robot. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work out, the rollout was limited, restricted only to the Fredbear's Family Diner location. All of this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood, as well as in his youngest son's favorite toy, Psychic Friend Fredbear.
Psychic friend Fredbear.
I mean, plushy Fredbear. But since cameras just weren't enough to raise a kid, he also left childcare duties to his eldest son, Michael. There was just one problem with that. Michael was far from the best babysitter. He tormented his younger brother by jump-scaring him with a foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of it from his cameras. Kids would be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Except Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just wasn't fair. It was time that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank. A prank that just so happened to be on this crying child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing, getting close to the animatronics. That would be embarrassing for the kid.
That
was
would be
such an
your last
embarrassment to
mistake.
him. His brother squirmed, screamed, kicked, and fought, but just as they were putting that small, squirming boy up to Fredbear's lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive spring locks inside the body had been triggered by the boy's movements, and they'd immediately clamped down. The wriggling stopped. The boy went limp, but it was just a prank. It was meant to be funny. The boy was taken to the hospital and was immediately given an IV. Flowers and pills filled the nightstand next to his hospital bed, but the damage was too severe. He couldn't recover. As the younger brother's consciousness began to fade, he could hear Michael's last words, a small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of the Fredbear plush, were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you back together. This would not be the end. No matter what, William's son would live again. It would just take time. Time that, right now, he just didn't have. His young son's heart flatlined as the boy faded into the inky unknown of the afterlife. In the aftermath of the tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurants. Kids were now required to wear security wristbands to prevent anyone from getting outside without parental permission. Any kid who approached the exit without permission would have to answer to the security puppet, a marionette on strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks. It was William's idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's Springlock failure, all the hybrid suits were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location. It was yet another tough pill to swallow after all the hard work that he and Henry had put into them. William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she could do was sit and watch TV. But his son Michael was far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations of a golden bear standing outside of his window. The boy was so racked with guilt that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother stuck inside the suit that took his life. The suit's three-toed feet digging into the wet earth. The words, "It's me," ringing through Michael's ears. Some nights, Michael would even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself, he disappeared into his work and his drinks. Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his son's gravesite. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect and stew on how Henry had stolen his idea for an animal-themed restaurant. How they'd cut his character out of the cartoon when everyone else was there. How Henry had humiliated him by buying him out of bankruptcy. And now there was his son. Henry had taken his son from him. The robotic part was the part that failed after all. William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter, Charlie, locked outside of the building, bullies laughing at her through the window. Fine, some other problem to fix. But then Afton got an idea. A beautifully awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man that had humiliated him all those years ago. Henry had killed his business, and now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for William to do some killing of his own. Let Henry feel what it's like to have something you love get ripped away. While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William attacked Charlie in the back alley. It felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment and bitterness trapped in his heart finally released in a moment of pure unapologetic evil. He would make Henry hurt like he hurts. And in that moment, William became a killer. He dropped Charlie's lifeless body and drove home, forced to confront his family problems later that night, appalled, but also a little excited by what he had just done. Charlie's death would remain on the books as a random act of violence. And though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence, nothing that could link him back to the crime. In the weeks that followed, Fredbear's family diner would close for good. 2 high-profile deaths around the restaurant with 2 grieving owners in such a short period of time was just too much bad press to handle. Besides, Freddy Fazbear's was still open, and it was the newer restaurant anyway. All the equipment from the diner, including the old yellow suits and security puppet, would get retired to that location, and there they would sit for 2 uneventful years. The rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were a hit. Tragic memories of their yellow predecessors quickly faded. Afton kept a low profile and buried himself in work and research, quickly reaching Henry's level of engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a little bit too experimental for the regular operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his kids via hidden security cameras. 1983. A passcode that served as a constant reminder of why the cameras were so important, why he was down there in the first place. This was all to fulfill the promise that he had made to his son, right? I will put you back together. This was for him, all for him, right? But cameras weren't enough. He needed to solve the runaway Michael problem. He had to keep him in the house. He couldn't have another one of his kids wind up dead inside of an animatronic suit. So why not run a little experiment on Michael? You see, all this work with Henry had gotten Afton to start learning more about life, robots, the human mind, and what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality is so easy to manipulate with a few sensory deceptions. Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could alter a person's vision. He could transform blank, smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares. Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. And so Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either. Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life suffered even more. He was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone.
Why do you hide inside your walls when there is music in my halls? All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb.
And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with the family, he refused time and time again, leaving her no choice but to leave.
You burned down my house?
You call that a house? It was like a morgue in there. You need to see your son.
The baby isn't mine.
Well, how's this? I'm keeping the diamond ring.
And through it all, there was one lingering feeling. William wasn't done. He had gotten a taste of what it felt like to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him, and he wanted more. June 26th, 1985. Putting on the golden Bonnie suit, he lured children one by one to the back room of the pizzeria when no one was looking. At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be stuffed inside of the suits. No one maintained those things anyway except for him. And so Susie would go into Chica. Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next. But it was easy. It was too easy. And with each little life he snuffed out, his lies got bigger. Their house was burning. They're just being kidnapped. Until the last one where all pretense was off. He let himself get violent. Too violent.
I'll
just wait for him after school, throw a bag over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
The body of Cassidy was far more bloody and broken than any of the others. He'd let himself go too far. That one he shouldn't have killed. With no more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The long-forgotten yellow Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken, like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing the missing children's incident. Police would even charge William with the crimes after finding security footage of the golden mascot suit luring kids to the back, but they couldn't convict him. They had no bodies, and his face had been hidden behind the mascot suit the entire time. What they had was circumstantial at best, and so he walked away a free man. But Henry knew the truth. In these murders, he saw his daughter Charlie all over again. So he threw Afton out of the company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the kids? Finally, he developed a solution. He would implement an even more extreme security system in the form of new animatronics. Toy animatronics, inspired by the toys that they had been selling years ago. But these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities.
But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away.
All the original animatronics, now withered with age, were moved to the new location. With the plan in place, it was time to try once more. The year was 1987, and the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was making headlines in local newspapers. Headlines that just so happened to catch the attention of William Afton. Freddy's was back, and without him? That was his idea, his character. Henry was, yet again, trying to cut him out of the picture. No. As long as these restaurants stayed open, William would always come back. Then he noticed the phone number to apply at the bottom of the article. $100 a week to apply call. Afton would go back, not as an owner or co-founder. He would go back in the one place that they would least suspect him, a lowly day shift security guard. And there it was, buried in the back of parts and services mixed in with the old withered animatronics was the golden rabbit. With the yellow security badge still on his chest, he used his crank to pull open the spring locks. It was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
1987, 5 more kids. He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing how devastating this would be to Henry the next morning. He didn't even try to hide his crime this time, just meant more blood on Henry's hands. He'd failed to protect the kids again. The restaurant had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get it to close. Good, if he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something strange. The old withered animatronics, they had been wandering around the building, spurred on by the puppet. It was almost like those old robots were trying to save the kids. Save them? They couldn't, obviously, but still, how were they moving? It was almost like they had been given life somehow. Did he have something to do with that? The following day, the news would report a security guard getting bitten by one of the animatronics during the day shift. Was that bite meant for him? William's curiosity was stronger now than his bloodlust. He had to learn more, but how? There was no way he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's pizzeria. Heck, there was practically no way a Freddy's would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed to create his own pizzeria.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them for his work. With that goal in mind, he designed a new breed of animatronic. Their endoskeletons fluid and flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They could incapacitate and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations. Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2 special ones. The first, Ballora, was an homage to the woman who left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby, was designed with his baby in mind. mind. Elizabeth, his youngest child. She would always be Daddy's little girl, the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed, until the day that she didn't.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make her just for me?
Oh no.
The day before Circus Baby's Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with Baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His mourning turned to excitement. He had to return to where it all started. 1993. Pathetic. This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly tried to reopen one final time with those old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stank of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls. One night, then another, then another. William repeatedly snuck into the old broken restaurant to lure the living animatronics to him, one by one dismantling them, robbing them of their endoskeletons. The metal had to be the secret. It had to contain the remnants of life itself. But he had to know for sure. Leaping out of a room that was invisible to the animatronics programming, he dragged the oversized robotic skeletons back to his underground workshop, back to where Circus Baby watched on with glowing, curious eyes. Eyes that somehow felt alive. Not knowing what else to do, William melted the robotic parts down. 5 animatronic endoskeletons reduced down to one silvery puddle of goo. Could he transfer this living metal to his own creations? He had to try. He picked up a syringe and filled it with the molten metal and injected the goo into Funtime Freddy's twisted, wiry endoskeleton. And suddenly the coils came to life. Like snakes writhing in a pile, what had once been cold, lifeless metal moved and jolted on its own. He'd done it! He had unlocked the secret to life itself. Except something was clearly wrong. The movements were erratic. They were violent, angry. Baby didn't act this way. She had been calm, collected. This was clearly something else. Something mindless and frantic. Perhaps by mixing the souls and then portioning them out, he had created incomplete beasts. He would need to keep testing to truly understand it. He needed more of this remnant. As he searched the old pizzeria one more time for any remaining scraps of metal, the ghosts attacked. His past victims come to collect their due, all led by Cassidy. The 5 lined up and blocked the door, and Afton's mind reeled. The scientific implications of this were incredible. Ghosts, real ghosts that he could see, all standing against him. But what could they do? What couldn't they do? He panicked as Cassidy approached. How do you stop something that's already dead? Maybe with the thing that resulted in their death in the first place. He would get into his suit like old times. He would regain his power over them just like the day that they died. He was the genius. He was the one in the suit. He was the one in charge. The spring lock snapped into place. Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned restaurant. Maybe it was just fate coming to collect its due. He didn't know. The only thing he did know was that his brain was suddenly filled with searing white-hot pain as hundreds of metallic pins and gears stabbed into his body from all sides. All he could do was collapse, blood slowly oozing out of the suit and pooling onto the floor around him. It couldn't end like this. It wouldn't end like this. His work was unfinished. Unable to move, his only option was to survive, to live, to keep living. It took days lying in his own blood, but eventually someone found him, a security guard making a normal report. When he saw the animatronics torn apart in the middle of the party room floor, it caused him to file an immediate report of a break-in. An owner would have to come in and claim the damage, and who else would it be other than Henry? Hope jumped in Afton's heart. Henry would see him. They were partners after all. He would be the one to help save him, to get him out of this suit, to relieve him from this tremendous pain. Henry entered the secret room. His eyes fell on Afton sitting there in the pool of red, and Henry, saying nothing, turned and walked away.
This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Nothing is being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything inside, then it's your own fault. Management also requests that this room not be mentioned to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
And so there Afton would sit, hanging on for 30 years, trapped behind the walls with an iron will that refused to die. end of this part. I say this part because it's not officially the end of the Afton era just yet, but this just felt like a really solid stopping point, and the episode has gone on forever. Okay, so most of this is things that we already knew, stuff that's been established and re-established time and time again by the games. That said, there are two things that I absolutely have to address. The first and biggest is the placement of sister location, or more specifically, Elizabeth's death. To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983. The biggest clue to this is that the crying child saw something. Remember what you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room, one presumably left behind by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the Character Encyclopedia outright suggest that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows circus babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNAF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit, except for the most important thing, the murder weapon.
Yeah.
Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has no motive. It just doesn't make sense prior to 1983. At this point in the story, he hasn't killed anyone, and we know for a fact that the missing children's incident is 1985. So Elizabeth's death coming before any of those events just doesn't work, hence why I placed it where I did in the narrative timeline. Afton's death here is also a bit tricky. We know that he returned to the FNAF 1 location to break down the original animatronics in order to harvest their remnant. We know that he melts down 5 things to become one thing. Candy Cadet makes that very clear. So the 5 things are the 5 endoskeletons from the various animatronics. That would be totally fine if it weren't for one huge problem. On his 5th visit to the pizzeria, Afton gets spring-locked. So either the 5 becoming 1 starts in 1993, but then finishes 30 years later when he re-emerges from the wall to add the last endoskeleton to his pile, or he's had himself some reason to return to the original location after harvesting all the stuff that he can. It's not ideal, but it's the one angle that makes the most sense. And with that, this next chapter comes to a close, thereby leaving us with 5 more games to cover and another 40 plus years of Fazbear history to recap. Ooh, when you put it that way, something tells me that this might balloon into 4 parts. Ugh, we'll see. Anyway, until then, my Faz heads, congratulations, you've made it through a massive upload. And hey, if you are still looking for more to watch, then check out the other 5 brand new awesome theories over on our new sister location, Style Theory.
Alrighty, so that was posted 13 days ago on February 18th. February 18th was last 2 Saturdays ago. So maybe if we're lucky, we'll get the next part on March 4th. I hope. Anyway, so that concludes the FNAF theories. So let's go ahead and see what other theories we can maybe watch. Don't trust Red, the next evolution. Beware the plants. You know what? Sure.
Thanks to Genshin Impact for sponsoring today's episode. Alright class, your assignment was to demonstrate reactions incorporating the tree-based element of Dendro. Tartaglia, I see you're using your hydro powers, very good there. Hutao, yours is, burning. Entirely sure what you expected there, but yep, it's a reaction. Naimiko, how are you getting along?
Show them.
Sorry, Yai, but you'll find that wood isn't a very effective conductor of electricity. I'm gonna have to lower your score.
Emerge.
Heh.
A+. Hello Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that loves its waifus, but not as much as it loves its science. And there is plenty of both to talk about today thanks to our sponsor, Genshin Impact. The game has just released their 4th country update. In it, you'll be exploring the new region of Sumeru, featuring a plethora of biomes ranging from the lush rainforests around the capital city to a desert full of underground ruins and buried lore. The main story quest focuses on a time loop where several characters start to realize that they've been reliving the same day over and over again, which itself has some fascinating scientific implications, but that's not what I want to focus on today. You see, each new party member in Genshin Impact is associated with one of 7 different elements: Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, Electro, Geo, and Anima. But at the start of this new storyline, we're introduced to Nihida, an archon of a brand new element known as Dendro, which comes from the Greek dendron, meaning tree.
Technically, Dendro has already existed in Genshin. Like, when you were running around Mondstadt, there was literally specifically slimes that were Dendro. So, it's not new, it's existed, it's just we haven't had any characters that were properly using it. Anyway, continuing on.
Now, plant-based powers, always fun to use in games, but there's more here than just vine whipping and razor leaves. Combat in Genshin Impact is based on creating elemental reactions by combining different elements. Most do what you'd expect. Combine Hydro and Cryo and you're getting yourself a freeze reaction. Combine Cryo and Pyro and you get the melt reaction. Makes sense. But with these new Dendro powers, things start to get a little bit more unexpected. Sure, combining Dendro with Pyro causes burning, and combining Dendro with Hydro causes the growth of seeds, nothing out of the ordinary there, but what really captured my curiosity was when I started mixing plants with electricity. Now, I'm sure we all remember 2nd grade science class where we learned that wood isn't the best conductor of electricity, but it doesn't seem to be that way in Genshin Impact. When you use Yai Miko's electro attacks with Nihida's Dendro ones, your attacks get stronger, which at first might seem obvious, combining 2 attacks equals 1 stronger attack, but it also produces a quicken effect. And no, I'm not talking about personal finance software here. This is a base effect which increases the damage of your next Electro or Dendro attack, creating either aggravate or spread respectively. Now that alone was unexpected, but even more interesting was when you mixed 3 elements. Dendro plus Hydro equals Bloom, but mixing in Electro as the 3rd ingredient creates an elemental cocktail known as Hyper Bloom, turning the seeds into guided missiles that seek out the nearest enemy. I don't care how many gigawatts he got, you are not getting seeds to leap up into the air to become guided missiles, right? Right? Well, I was curious about these reactions and whether or not they were based in some form of reality. So I did a bit of digging, only to find that there's way more to the relationship between plants and electricity than our school science classes would have us believe. So stick with me, theorists, because I got a feeling that today's theory is really gonna grow on you. So outside of strapping some jumper cables onto my ficus, where can I see the effects of electricity on plants? Well, one of the most common occurrences are during lightning storms. Lightning occurs when particles inside a cloud collide with each other, knocking electrons free, which then attach to other particles. The particles that lose their electrons now have a slightly positive charge and are lighter, thus they go to the top of the cloud. The ones that gain electrons are now heavier and have a slightly more negative charge, causing them to go to the bottom of the cloud. Those slightly negative particles also now need a way to equalize, so when the positive and negative charges grow large enough, that's when you get lightning. It's the discharge as everything equalizes. The ground is also positively charged, which is why lightning is sometimes able to jump downwards towards Earth. But here's where things start to get interesting. You see, air isn't a very good conductor, and lightning wants to take the path of least resistance. That's why it'll strike a lightning rod or a tall building. They're the fastest path to a positive charge and are often made of conductive materials like metal. And while trees aren't exactly the most conductive, they are tall, so they immediately become a much more attractive option than just traveling through plain old air. And the relationship between trees and lightning doesn't just stop there.
Like, literally, when you play Stardew Valley and Breath of the Wild, like, weird comparisons, I know, but in Stardew Valley, if you have fruit trees and you leave them, and if you have them planted outside of your greenhouse, they can get hit by lightning. It doesn't matter if you have like 20 electro rods, like electric rods or whatever they're called. They will be hit, and they will fry your tree, and you will lose them. I remember one time I was climbing a tall tree in Breath of the Wild during when a thunderstorm suddenly appeared. I had removed all the metal armor, and instead of me getting specifically hit, the tree I was climbing got hit. And it fell over and I lost half my lives. It didn't happen on while I was playing it on stream, sadly. It happened when I was playing it off stream. But oh my god, it was like, what do you mean? But yeah, no, trees, if they're tall enough, they can be hit. And it's kind of terrifying. Especially because if you hear the sound of cracking, you run as far away as you can. Because that means either that tree is coming down or the branch is coming down and you will die if it's heavy enough. So please be smart and don't be near a tree when there's a lightning storm.
Trees are made up of roughly 50% water, with a lot of that moisture contained just below the bark. Meanwhile, a single bolt of lightning can generate temperatures of about 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly 30,000 degrees Celsius. Believe it or not, that's about 6 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And so what happens when you heat water really quickly in an enclosed space? Well, it turns into a gas and expands. It needs a place to go in a hurry. In an instant, the pressure inside the tree builds until finally the gas pushes so hard that the bark can't handle it anymore, causing the tree to literally explode. Wood and splinters are sent flying everywhere, as if we didn't need more reasons to stay indoors playing video games. Now, these splinters aren't exactly homing missiles, but it does show that tree plus water plus electricity does result in flying plant projectiles that can do some serious damage.
Also, falling tree limbs that will try to squish you.
On impact. On Genshin Impact! But what about when a tree isn't filled with water? In the game, if you combine Dendro and Electro, one of the effects that you get is Aggravate, which boosts the power of your next Electro attack. And that seems kind of weird, right? Why would running electricity through a dry plant make your next electrical attack stronger? Shouldn't have any impact, right? Or maybe even a negative impact? Wrong. This actually lines up with real-world science. In a 2004 Ukrainian study, scientists tested the electrical resistance of a leaf as it slowly dried up. Now, you would think that as the leaf dries up and slowly dies, that its electrical resistance would increase. Less water left in the leaf would mean less ability for electricity to flow, right? But no, the drier the leaf became, the easier electricity was able to flow through the parts of the leaf that were still living. The researchers weren't exactly sure why, but they assumed that it might have to do with a stronger concentration of water and salts in the tissue that was left remaining, allowing for greater electrical conductivity. But regardless of the reason, it yet again proves Genshin right in its scientific principles. The first shot of electricity through a plant is basically paving the way for subsequent shocks to be stronger and more effective. So currently the scoreboard is 2 for 2, which means it's time to look at the final elemental reaction spread to see if Genshin can run the perfect game. In combat, spread is the opposite of aggravate. Basically, it uses Electro mixed with Dendro to make your next Dendro attack more powerful. The game even gives us an in-universe explanation for this relationship. We meet a child called Sudebe who tells us that, quote, Electro is good. It makes plants stronger and bear more fruits. But that can't be true in real life, right? If electricity truly made plants stronger and more fruitful, why haven't we heard of it before? How am I able to go apple picking? Wouldn't every farmer ever just electrocute their orchard to try and max out their harvests? Well, when you start to look into it, there's actually a lot more here than meets the eye. Loyal theorists, allow me to introduce you to the new world of an old science, electro-horticulture. This is an old study, but way back in 1746, a researcher named Dr. von Miambre from Edinburgh, Scotland, took 2 myrtle trees and ran an electrical current through one of them to see if it would cause it to grow any differently. Now, there aren't many details available about his exact experiment, but from what I could gather, he used an electrostatic generator to pass a current directly through the tree and back down to the ground. And because static electricity runs at a much lower amperage than a lightning bolt, there was no risk of accidental splinter missiles. Instead, after an entire month of being zapped, the tree appeared to have grown taller and had more leaf growth than its non-electrical twin. This was a huge discovery and could be a great justification for Genshin's claims that adding Electro to Dendro gives you more powerful Dendro. But again, if this was true, why aren't gardeners the world over putting power grids through their fields?
True.
To be honest, his conclusions were kind of hard to replicate. Naturally, other scientists saw these crazy findings and conducted similar experiments, but they wound up with mixed results at best. Some claimed that they got the exact same results, others saw no difference, and even more said that their trees outright died due to the electric flow. But if you think a few failed ferns were gonna stop science, then clearly you haven't been watching my videos. in which case you should probably just hit the subscribe button so you can be on top of all the coolest scientific revelations as they relate to modern gen open world video games. It is a very specific niche, but we are good at it. Anyway, at the very start of 2022, scientists decided to take this very old study in a very new direction. Researchers from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing attempted to prove that electricity aids the growth of plants. But rather than electrifying the plant itself with static electricity, they decided to instead put the plant inside of an electric field. Basically, they placed the seeds on a metal plate that was connected directly to a negative electrode, and above where the seeds were growing was a metal plate connected to a positive electrode. This created an electric field between them as the positive and negative charges tried desperately to come together. After 3 days of germination, seed growth inside the electric field was 40% higher than the control group.
Whoa.
When it came to seedling growth, the electrofield resulted in a growth increase of 15%.
That's actually
the
cool.
plants inside the electrofield gave a crop yield that was 20% higher than the control group. Seems bizarre, right? Like, why would being in the presence of electricity change plant growth so dramatically? Unfortunately, the research paper doesn't provide an explanation, but you know what? I think I can. Science has shown that thunderstorms tend to help with plant growth not just because of increased rainfall, but also because their electrical energy helps separate the nitrogen atoms that are floating around in the air. These atoms then fall to the ground, where they're absorbed by the soil and eventually wind up inside a plant's roots. The University of Melbourne, though, has a different solution. Maybe electric fields act kind of like natural pesticides. The electricity doesn't bother the plant, but it might scare away insects, acting kind of like a low-level bug zapper. There's also the fact that within an electrical field, water tends to have lower surface tension, resulting in faster evaporation after rainfall or watering. Lastly, it might just be what electricity does to the plant itself, effectively boosting the metabolism of the plant by accelerating the transportation of nutrients like calcium and bicarbonates. Regardless of which explanation is correct, when it comes right down to it, plant growth involves a lot of chemical reactions, and electricity appears to have the ability to affect each and every one of them for the better. There you have it, my friends. The electro-dendro effects that we see in the game are absolutely adhering to real-world science. Electricity appears to strengthen, grow, and spread plants, even causing them to sometimes spontaneously explode out like a bunch of low-flying missiles. Sure, the results may be a lot more bombastic in the game than they are in real life, but when the alternative is literally watching the grass grow, I think the choice is obvious. But hey, thanks again to Genshin Impact for sponsoring today's video. It's been really fun to put the lore down for once and instead focus on some of the new cool sciencey aspects of the game. So special thanks to them for letting us roll with something a bit out of the ordinary. That said, it doesn't mean that there isn't new lore for us to discover. In fact, in their 3.3 update, they just released a brand new 5-star character, the Wanderer. Once our enemy, he's now an ally with a dark and mysterious backstory full of sorrow and betrayal, which sounds a lot like my kind of character. And if you're dying to understand these characters a little bit more, well, you can now take part in their Wishes from Tevat event, where you'll receive postcards directly from the characters themselves. Apparently, there are plenty of hidden Easter eggs to find inside of them, and you know what that means. Lore! I guess I'm just gonna have to keep checking in to see if Yai Miko has written me back. But if you just fancy something different, there's also the brand new game mode Genius Invocation trading card game.
You see, okay, like, look, I love Genshin Impact as much as the next guy, but card games, ugh, I hate when games add card games to their stuff, because sometimes, like, look, sometimes they can be fun, but in this case, when you're not really understanding what element affects what element and stuff, like, I'm still learning all the elements, like which is weak to what, etc. I still don't even have Pokemon's element differences completely memorized. It's like, it's frustrating. And sometimes I swear some of the NPC AI is just too strong, and it's just like, what the hell?
That's right, Genshin now has itself a trading card game. Collect cards, build your decks, and destroy your enemies. And oh yes, my friends, there is lore to be found in there too. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, you'll just have to play it and find it for yourself. So, if you want to desperately hear back from your chosen waifu, or you're just interested in trying out the new Dendro powers like we talked about today, head on down to the description and click the link below to download the game on the device of your choice for free in order to start your adventure. It is a huge, massive open world game with a robust story, and all of it is...
Genshin fans, memorize that code. I don't know if it's any good still, but you know what? I'll take a picture of it myself. Don't know if it's any good still, but you know what? Genshin fans, take the code and see if it works.
weeks for free. If you're looking for something cool to do this winter, there it is. It'll keep you busy for a while. Now, if you'll excuse me, Stephanie's got a vegetable garden that I think could use a little bit more juice. Time to break out the car battery. In the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Ruining your childhood since 2011. Oh my goodness. Okay. Cool. So, I know they did another Genshin Impact theory, so let me see. Genshin Impact. Alright. We'll watch these two. Back to video.
Thanks to Genshin Impact for sponsoring today's episode. Wow, it's been almost a year since I last did a theory on Genshin Impact.
Oh, that's not the first one? Okay, this is the first one. Okay, let's watch this one first.
I don't need an umbrella, but you can use one if you need.
To be honest, I was freezing even before the snow started.
As long as you stick to your own path, it doesn't matter what Mother Nature throws at you.
All the same, I wouldn't mind stopping to light a fire.
Guess we can rest a bit.
Hey, Luke, can you do your thing?
Burn!
Much better. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that in terms of good jokes, has no good jokes. Today's episode is sponsored by Genshin Impact, which low-key ended up being one of the biggest video game releases of 2020. It's a free open-world action game available on PC, PlayStation 4 and 5, and mobile. Basically everywhere you would want to play it. And unlike a static by-the-numbers adventure, Genshin Impact is set in a living, breathing, changing world with new content being added all the time. In fact, a new update just dropped not long ago which added characters like the fiery Yanfei and the cold as ice Eula. But what was perhaps most exciting about this update wasn't the new things that it added, but rather the old things that it brought back. Specifically, the return of everyone's favorite god of contracts, Zhongli. Now, I get it. With a name like God of Contracts, you might think that this guy is some sort of glorified paper pusher, but nothing could be further from the truth. Not only is he a sharp dresser, an expert fighter, and a total shipper's dream, but as you'll come to see by the end of today's theory, I also believe Zhongli is bringing about an era of ruin to this game's world. It's my belief that he's set in motion a series of events that will send society into a technological dark age. You heard that right. This guy, this supposed hero of the game,
I don't like seafood.
Mr. I don't like seafood himself, is setting up a catastrophe that the characters in the game are going to have to struggle against in the near future. Or heck, maybe even in a later update. It's at this point that the game's developers wanted me to make sure that I say that while this is indeed a sponsored video, all the conclusions I'm about to share are mine and mine alone, and that this is pure hypothesis. Game hypothesis. Based on in-game dialogue and real-world evidence. Now, in case you're new to the world of Genshin Impact, let me quickly bring you up to speed. The game is set in the world of Teyvat, which is divided into 7 regions. Each region is ruled by a local god or archon, corresponding to one of the game's 7 different elements: Geo, Hydro, Pyro, Electro, Cryo, Dendro, and Animo.
Okay, so we know Venti is Animo, Zhongli is Geo, Raiden Shogun is Electro, and Nahida is Dendro. I'm excited to find out who the last 3 are. I know the next region we're probably going to, it's another female Archon from what they confirmed in-game dialogue. So I'm actually really excited to find out what her character is like, and then seeing the last 2. Because, hype!
By the way, those last 2 are Greek to you, well, that's because they literally are Greek. Animo means wind, and Dendro means tree. Zhongli, our main focus for today, is the human form of the Geo God, responsible for protecting the second region of the game, Liyue. Now, Liyue is super important. It's the largest business and commerce hub in this entire world. This place is more capitalist than Elon Musk shilling for Dogecoin, to the point where the closest thing that they have to a ruling government is a council of 7 influential merchants and business leaders. Liyue is practically synonymous with prosperity and wealth. It's also home to the Golden House, the only place where the world's currency of Mora is minted. And not just minted, mind you, it's brought into existence by a literal god. And the man responsible is, you guessed it, Zhongli himself. You see, when he's not walking around complaining about seafood in his human form, Zhongli takes the form of a dragon named Morax, the divine figure that oversees Liyue and is responsible.
Bro, they've made a plushie of his dragon form. I want it so bad. It's so cute. Ah!
responsible for creating Mora, the world's currency. Yes, the dragon god Morax creates Mora. He named the world's currency after himself. Talk about an egomaniac, am I right? Again, when you're an angry divine dragon, I guess you do you. Anyway, according to the in-game description, Mora is, quote, common currency, the one language that everybody speaks. And in the world of Teyvat, that does seem to be the case. All 7 regions use Mora as their money. Merchants everywhere around the world accept Mora in payment regardless of what region they're in. Okay, so why is any of this important? And why do I think that this all might be setting up an elaborate game of dominoes that ends in the inevitable collapse of the world of Teyvat? Well, here's the twist, friends. When the player first arrives in Liyue, we're told that Morax, after 6,000 years, has decided to retire. Not really, he actually decides to fake his own death so he can run around yucking it up in his human form. But whether real or not, the implication of his quote-unquote death are huge. Not only does it send everyone in Liyue into a panic over the fact that their guardian god is now supposedly dead, but it also throws the world's currency into chaos. Because remember, Morax is responsible for creating all of the Mora. Without him, there is no more. Period. The supply has reached its upper limit. And this isn't just a case of me overthinking the game's events. Genshin Impact actually comments directly on it.
Zhongli, now that you don't have your gnosis, what's going to happen to all the Mora in Teyvat? Since Morax is dead, are they all just gonna disappear? Also, isn't the Golden House the only mint in the entire continent? Will it even continue to work?
The Mora present now will not vanish. But the Golden House will indeed have to cease operations for a lengthy period of time, since creating Mora requires the use of the Geo-Archon's power.
This is terrible! We're all about to run out of Mora! The world is coming to an end!
Mind you, this doesn't seem to be a reversible decision. When he retired, Zhongli decided to give up the source of his divinity, an item known as a gnosis. The gnosis is an item that allows Archon gods to draw power from the heavenly realm, essentially amplifying their powers. Now, this entire scene is kind of played for laughs. After all, it's become a running joke at this point that Zhongli is naive when it comes to business. Apparently, despite spending a lifetime literally creating Mora, he never got the memo that you actually need to carry it around to pay for stuff.
You said it was half price, not that we could leave without paying.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I must have forgotten to do that too.
And it's not until after retiring from life as the god Morax that he realizes that, might have been a good idea to take advantage of that money-making ability and put some aside for himself for a rainy day.
It's a shame that I didn't think of it at the time.
Who knew that the god of contracts would have such bad money sense? But in this scene, Paimon, your travel companion and emergency food source, is absolutely right. This is no laughing matter. Zhongli even acknowledges this.
Yes. This is indeed a major issue from a financial standpoint.
So what exactly are the financial implications for Teyvat now that its universal currency is no longer being minted? Well, what this one little joking dialogue opens up is a catastrophic end to all the advanced civilizations of the world. Oh yeah, this goes way further than just being an issue of dollars and cents. In the real world, if a government just stopped issuing new currency, the most immediate result would be deflation. You may be familiar with the word inflation. That's what happens when there's too much money or not enough goods to buy with that money, which results in rising prices. Deflation is, as you'd expect, the opposite. It's the result of either there being a rising number of goods and or a decrease in the amount of money available, and it leads to prices falling as the limited amount of money out there in the market becomes more and more valuable. Woohoo! Lower costs are great, right? Nothing bad about that. Not according to economists. Most economists agree that deflation is a bad thing because it discourages spending. Think about it. If you know that there's a limited supply of money and there's never going to be any more, you're going to hold on to every cent that you have and you're going to be really picky about what you spend it on. Plus, if you know that prices are going to be lower in the future, that actually discourages you from spending your money today. That loaf of bread that costs $2 today might cost $1 next week. So logically, you could hold on to your money and wait to buy it. That results in everyone hoarding their money. And by everyone, I do mean everyone. Not just regular consumers, but also business owners who are discouraged from spending money to grow their businesses by hiring new employees, and investors who just sit on their money instead of lending it out or investing it in new business. As the money supply dries up, employers are forced to either reduce wages or lay people off, or a combination of both, which ultimately leads to the economy growing weaker, resulting in a self-perpetuating cycle that results in more deflation, which leads to more unemployment and even lower wages. One of the most famous examples of a deflationary economy is the Great Depression during the 1930s, which suffered the most extreme forms of all the things we just talked about. Reduced trade, falling profits, lower wages, higher unemployment. It was not a pretty picture. So is that the fate that awaits the world of Teyvat now that there's no new Mora being printed? No, my friends, it is actually much worse. Because the truth is that Mora isn't actually like the real world currencies that we're used to. And the differences make the situation that much more catastrophic. See, the things that come to mind when we usually think about money, US dollars, British pounds, Japanese yen, etc., are examples of what's known in economic terms as fiat currency. When you think about it, a dollar doesn't really have any intrinsic value. It's useful because you can use it to buy stuff, but say you were trapped in the middle of a desert with nobody to buy from, all the money in the world wouldn't mean a thing to you. Fiat money only usually comes about through government regulation. After all, I could just start making mat bucks, coins with my little face on them, and go to stores trying to buy things with my mat bucks, but nobody would want to take those coins no matter how much I insisted that they actually should be worth what I'm trying to buy. Historically, the only way to get people to accept fiat money is by forcing them, hence the need for a central government to issue the coin and collect taxes in that same currency. Suddenly the government has said these things have a certain value. But the truth about Mora is that it's not a fiat currency like dollars or euros, it's an actual commodity, like crude oil or steel or salt. Going back to the game's flavor text descriptions, a loading screen tip tells us that, quote, Mora is a catalyst of sorts, in that it's a medium for physical transformation. That is why so many things can only be accomplished through the use of Mora. In other words, Mora can actually be used to do things. For example, anytime you sit down at the alchemy crafting table, you want to combine your 3 firm arrowheads to create 1 sharp arrowhead? Well, that'll require 25 Mora. That's not a rental fee that you're paying for the use of the crafting table. You can use the crafting table at Obito's research post in Dragonspine long after he's abandoned it, but you'll still need to spend your Mora because the Mora is actually being consumed during the alchemical process. And when I say that Mora is used for all sorts of things in the world of Genshin Impact, I really mean it. Want to absorb the experience from a material like the Wanderer's Advice to raise your level? That's gonna require Mora. Want to take a weapon and refine it? Mora. Want to grind up your adventurer's pocket watch, tail feather, and bandana to enhance a crummy artifact? Can't be done without the use of Mora. There's something special about Mora that allows it to function as a catalyst, and apparently the only way to make it is with some sort of divine spark. In that sense, Mora isn't actually a fiat currency. It has inherent value that makes it become a unit of exchange. This is also something that we've seen happen in the real world. Throughout most of human history, people didn't have a big centralized government that could create their own money systems, so they instead relied on commodities. Back in ancient times, Egypt, along with many other civilizations around the Mediterranean, would use salt as the medium of exchange. In fact, the word salary literally comes from the fact that soldiers in the Roman army sometimes received their payment in salt. A soldier's monthly allowance of salt was called a salarium. Anyway, this system was able to take off because in the desert, you lose a lot of salt through sweating, and thus everyone needed salt. And because everyone can make use of it, salt naturally became a universal medium of exchange. Even after governments sprang up and started printing currencies, commodities were still sometimes used as a standard of value. For instance, in the 16th and 17th century, European fur traders came to North America and started using beaver pelts as a standard of value. One new pair of shoes, it's gonna cost you 12 pelts. This became essential for trading between Europeans and indigenous Americans because, let's face it, why would the North Americans care about some flimsy paper with a king's face on it? It meant nothing to them. Beaver pelts. Now that is what I'm talking about. Mora is the Teyvat equivalent of salt or beaver pelt. Lots of people require it for their profession. That's good news for the people of Liyue because it means that everyone in the world wants the Mora that comes out of the Golden House. But it also means that when Morax stops producing more and the Golden House shuts down, all that Mora is slowly being used up, bit by bit, with every potion that's made, every weapon that gets enhanced. Mora is a finite resource. Eventually, all of those activities that require Mora are gonna grind to a halt. And that's the real problem with Morax deciding to retire and stop making new Mora. It's not just sending the world into a financial disaster, it's also sending the world into a technological disaster. No alchemy means no new scientific advancements or inventions. No ways to refine or enhance weaponry means the people of Teyvat are increasingly in peril in the face of the numerous monsters that litter the overworld. The quest line in Liyue makes a big deal about how Morax decided it was time for him to retire because the people no longer needed a god to protect them. There's this big dramatic team up where the player and all the leaders of Liyue band together to defend the city against a big giant ancient sea monster that Morax sealed away long ago. And they managed to win, which supposedly proves that they no longer need Morax. But the truth is that the biggest service Morax provided to Liyue, heck, the entire world, wasn't all the times that he turned into a big powerful powerful dragon and beat up the other powerful monsters, his real greatest service was something much more mundane, his namesake of Mora. Look,
he basically was the biggest money producer in the land, and now he's no longer doing that. So, uh-oh, you done diddly fucked up.
sitting in the Golden House all day cranking out new coins might not be the most glorious part of being a god, but it was the most vital service that Zhongli provided. The small hope we have is that Morax's retirement might not be permanent. Maybe he could be persuaded to get back his gnosis and start minting Mora again. But Morax tells us that the Golden House, quote, will indeed have to cease operations for a lengthy period of time. And given that he's 6,000 years old, a lengthy period of time to him might mean multiple generations or even multiple centuries. Until then, the world is stuck with a rapidly dwindling supply of its most important resource. Not only does that mean scientific progress slows, but eventually the world will run out of Mora, until even the items that people have come to accept as basic necessity can't be crafted anymore. And that is how the world of Teyvat dies. Not with a bang, but with a whimper and empty wallets. But hey, that's just a...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this editing. Jesus.
Theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And one final thank you to Genshin Impact for...
Alrighty. So he makes a point in this theory that I want to point out.
Should really try another one of those. Any ideas, Paimon?
More riddles? Paimon's dizzy already. Oh no, Paimon used up all her brain juice.
Welcome to my life, Paimon. Welcome to my life. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that sees there's a 50-50 chance that you'll hit that subscribe button, and I like those odds. As I've already mentioned, today's episode is sponsored by Genshin Impact, who did an episode with us a year ago as well, so glad we didn't scare them away. They just released their new 2.5 update on February 16th, adding even more content for you to enjoy and explore in this ever-expanding world. There's new enemies, new quests, they're even bringing back some old characters like the Raiden Shogun to stand alongside their newest 5-star character, Yai Miko, which is funny, because both of them actually play an important part in today's theory. Don't you love it when an integration works out seamlessly? Now, all these new features are great and all, but we all know why I'm really here. Lore! For those of you who don't know, when you boot up the game for the first time, your character, the Traveler, gets sealed into a deep slumber where you then experience nightmares for 500 years. Talk about hitting a progression wall right off the bat. When you finally do wake up, you find yourself in Teyvat, a land that's been divided up into 7 regions, each with an Archon, a local elemental god presiding over it. Now, the last time we covered Genshin, we spoke mainly about the Geo-Archon Zhongli and how his decision to fake his own death might have actually doomed the people of Teyvat. So when Genshin asked me to do another episode, I figured, why not take a closer look at yet another Archon? But this time, let's one up the stakes. I actually wanted to focus on an Archon that we haven't met yet. One that's been heavily teased, and one that is integral to the ongoing plot of the game. The mysterious Tsaritsa, Cryo-Archon of Snizhnaya. The fact that I was able to pronounce that correctly should show that we not only do our research, but we also really enjoy this game. Fun fact about Tsaritsa, by the way, it's not actually her real name, it's a title. A title...
Yeah, I think she's the one that we're seeing next.
That comes from the feminine form of the word Tsar, hence why her followers sometimes call her the Tsaritsa.
Bravo, comrade! I doubt even that Tsaritsa herself ever expected I would make it this far.
Also, if the Tsar title and the word comrade didn't clue you in, the Snezhnaya region is actually inspired by Russia, which also explains why it's associated with the cryo element. There's a reason the Ushanka were invented in Russia. Ushanka are the hats with the fur ear flaps. Yeah, we're learning all sorts of wacky words today. This is a recording nightmare, man. Anyway, despite never having met Tsaritsa herself, she does appear to be the closest thing that Genshin Impact has to an overarching villain. Her followers, the Fatui, go from region to region, beating up or tricking local gods in an effort to steal the source of their powers. But I've got a theory. You know the deal at this point. That Tsaritsa isn't actually the villain that she appears to be. I'm determined to predict this game's big twist before it happens. That Tsaritsa, for how nasty her methods may be, will actually be revealed to be doing all this in order to save humanity. She has good intentions. Oh yeah, my friends, this is classic game theory. The villain isn't the villain at all, and I'm about to prove it. Oh, and also the brand would like me to remind you that although this video is sponsored, all the conclusions I've come to are mine and mine alone, based on dialogue and story elements within the game. I've got no external help whatsoever, and who knows, I might have just prompted them to change their entire storyline. Okay, so let's look at the events of the game to understand what she's done and what might really be going on here. here. In pretty much every story arc thus far, Tsaritsa's followers, the Fatui, are constantly up to shady stuff. In the prologue, we see one of Tsaritsa's lieutenants beat up the Archon of Mondstadt in order to steal his magical god item, his Gnosis, which connects the user to Celestia, land of the gods, in the process amplifying their elemental powers. Each of the 7 Archons has one Gnosis, which means that Tsaritsa already has one of her own, but now she's sending out her goons to go and collect the others. Given that these are meant to be sources of divine cosmic power, Tsaritsa immediately starts giving off some serious Thanos vibes, and her quest for the Infinity Stones doesn't stop in the prologue. In the very next arc, we have our second major encounter with the Fatui, with another of Tsaritsa's lieutenants trying to steal the Gnosis off the corpse of yet another Archon.
So you've been planning to take the Gnosis from inside the Exuvia all along?
It's my duty to see the will of the Tsaritsa fulfilled. She will get that which she desires.
Now, those of you who watched my last story will remember that this Archon was never actually dead. He just faked his death so he could kick it back in his human form, Zhongli. So then we win, right? They can't steal his Gnosis because Zhongli's alive. Except then this happens.
You remember the agreement, Morax, if you would be so kind. The Gnosis, please.
The contract is fulfilled. That which thou seeketh is now bestowed unto thee.
Zhongli just hands his Gnosis over to the Fatui because of a contract. Paimon does a good job of summing up my feelings here.
No, wait! That's an exciting twist and all, but why give the Gnosis to the Fatui?
I do not give it for free. I give it as agreed upon in the contract, for it is a matter solely between the Tsaritsa and I.
Fine, keep your secrets. I'm gonna be over here freaking out because Tsaritsa now has 3 Gnosises. No.
Technically 4 now because she also has Nahidas.
Gnosisai? No, Nosai? I like Nosai. Anyway, that now means that she possesses earth, wind, and ice. Ice powers, not earth, wind, and fire. Though, I do wish that she would join a disco band at some point. Anyway, in the next arc, we travel to Inazuma, where word on the street is that the local Archon, the Raiden Shogun, has been—
Oh no, technically, she has Venti, she has Zhongli, she has Raiden Shoguns, and she has Nahida. So she has 4. She just needs fire and waters. Uh-oh.
been oppressing her people. At first, it seems like it's gonna be a story all about the region's internal politics, but nope, turns out the Fatui were behind this one as well, sowing discord and seizing control over the region for themselves. Of course, we confront Tsaritsa's lieutenant, she denies it, we fight her, she loses, she dies. So, yay? Not quite.
Did you say Gnosis? As in, the little thing that looks something like a chess piece. I handed that over.
You had one job, Yai. Archons just need better staff. Once again, we're one step behind, and just like that, Tsaritsa and the Fatui are in control of 4 of the 7 Gnosis. Geo, Cryo, Animo, and Electro. Give her a bit more time and she's gonna be able to summon Captain Planet by herself. So Tsaritsa is making some pretty great progress bedazzling her Infinity Gauntlet of God Gems. Already, that paints her as a bit of a villain. But why is she doing this? What is her true goal here? Does she just want a bunch of power? Well, in the story trailer, we actually learn her reasoning for collecting all the Gnosis.
Her followers hope only to be on her side when the day of her rebellion against the divine comes at last.
Rebelling against the divine. Well, yeah, tearing down the heavens is usually not something that the good guys want. She is clearly the big bad of the game, right? Right? Well, think back to how she obtained 2 of the Gnosis. Both Zhongli and Yai Miko gave them up willingly. It was a negotiation, not a battle or trickery. For both these Archon to just give up their godly power, it feels like there's gotta be good reason there. Sure, Zhongli might be a bit of an airhead when it comes to managing money, but he has a long history of forging contracts that ensure the long-term well-being for the people in his region. And when I say that he has a long history, I do mean he has a long history. He's been protecting Liyue for over 3,700 years. I don't think Zhongli would be giving up his Gnosis so willingly if he was sure he was giving it over to the bad guys. Despite his lack of understanding when it comes to economic issues, he at the very least has his people's best interests at heart. So then, what about the Archon that Team Tsaritsa beat up? Why would Tsaritsa take that first Gnosis in such a violent fashion? Well, according to the story for the item Stainless Bloom, which is supposedly telling us the story of Signora, we get this quote: "We share the same goal, you, your Tsaritsa, and I. Cleanse the sources of distortion in this world, short-sighted, ignorant gods." Tsaritsa believes that her path is righteous and for the betterment of all people. Venti, the protector of that first Gnosis, was exactly that, a short-sighted and ignorant god who had basically abandoned his people, leaving them to fend for themselves. It's actually similar to Zhongli's story too, a god who got tired of being a god and gave up the Gnosis in order to walk around as a mortal vessel. In the game, Venti's abandonment is framed as a good thing. People of Mondstadt are proud of their self-reliance, and his songs and fun-loving nature make him beloved by the people. He's the fun boss who everyone likes, but he doesn't actually do his job. When Zaritza's lieutenant shows up, she calls him out on this, addressing him as the
absentee Archon of Mondstadt.
An absentee Archon, someone who's abused and neglected their role. So maybe that's why Zaritza and the team stole the Gnosis by force. She didn't see Venti as worthy of bargaining with. As they say later,
that Zaritza's dream is the noblest and purest thing in all the world. These other mundane details you insist on mentioning, they're just necessary sacrifices.
But necessary to what? Overthrow Celestia? Take down the heavens? It doesn't sound like a very noble cause to me, but then you get lines like this.
She no longer needs the power of the Gnosis, and in any case, she tells me she has severed ties with Celestia.
Sure, the Gnosis is a source of power, but the Raiden Shogun still wields immense power despite giving up the Gnosis long ago. So maybe this quest has less to do with a quest for power and more to do with the quest against Celestia. As Paimon says,
there would keep them connected to Celestia.
A connection back to Celestia, which, as we just heard, the Raiden Shogun has no need or desire for. Now, why would that be? Well, it's important to understand what exactly Celestia is. As I've already mentioned, it's kind of like heaven. It's located above the clouds, it's a place where those who've ascended to divine godhood can hang out, and we're told it's basically the physical creation of heavenly principles, or the divine. That sounds like it should be a realm associated with the good guys, but we've already had a run-in at the start of the game with the sustainer of heavenly principles, and let's just say that she wasn't acting all that good to us.
Who are you? The sustainer of heavenly principles. The arrogation of mankind ends now.
This is who's sustaining the heavenly principles that's responsible for the creation of Celestia. Remember that whole thing that I mentioned that happens at the start of the game? The whole sealed away into 500 years of slumber filled with nightmares thing? Yeah, this is who does it to us. Someone who seems to value judgment above and beyond anything else. Listen, I'm not gonna deny that mankind can be guilty of a little arrogation every now and then, but the way that she's saying it, it sounds like her answer to ending mankind's arrogation might just involve ending mankind in the first place. Also, what's arrogation mean? Is it being arrogant?
To claim or seize without justification.
Okay, so not really being arrogant. Also not to be confused with irrigation, which is watering land by artificial means. So mankind has seized things without justification, and Celestia ain't too happy about it, and might just be angry enough to start taking some extreme actions. Looking deeper into the lore, we learned that there was once a war called the Cataclysm of the the Cataclysm in Cairnria. Yep, where the gods in Celestia destroyed an entire nation because they went against the heavenly principles. I would go back and look up the pronunciation of Cainria, but that entire nation was destroyed, so what are they gonna do about it? Anyway, the way the whole Cataclysm thing was handled by Celestia seemed to have left the Archons with a bitter taste in their mouths. There's a line in one of Zhongli's story arcs where he has this to say about the heavenly principles, and how his values may have been eroded over the millennia.
People abandon and surrender the things they love to pursue the right path. Perhaps this is the erosion imposed on me by the natural order of this world.
In the original Chinese, he says Tianli. It's translated here as the natural order of this world, and that's a valid translation. But it's the same word that's translated elsewhere as heavenly principles, other valid translations being the divine or destiny. In other words, while Celestia may well be the world of the divine, it's less a realm of all that's good and loving and holy, and more a realm of inevitable destiny. Zhongli knows this. He's experienced
inevitable destiny and probably order.
The erosion of his personality and of his friends' personalities over time. And in this cutscene, he outright says that he believes that this erosion is imposed on him by the heavenly principles. All of this would imply that when you use a Gnosis, the connection goes both ways. Sure, the Gnosis made Zhongli more powerful and able to produce Mora, but it's also changed who he is as a person. If that's what he believes, then it starts to make a lot more sense why someone like Zhongli would want to sever their connection with the realm of heavenly principles. It could be why he's giving up his Gnosis to Zaritza willingly, and also the reason why the Raiden Shogun would have severed her connection to Celestia as well. They want to break from destiny. They want to live their own lives, and Celestia isn't happy about giving up control. So when we're told that the Zaritza is gearing up for a rebellion against the divine, that is what she's planning on fighting against. She's battling the same forces that sealed the player character away in a nightmare cube for 500 years. She's battling the same forces that eroded Zhongli, the same forces that the Raiden Shogun intentionally cut herself off from long ago, and the same forces that wiped an entire entire nation from the map. Even Venti, who didn't go out of his way to give up his Gnosis, seems pretty undisturbed by losing it. He reacts by going to hang out under a tree.
The wind amongst the branches is good. I love the way it smells.
You just got robbed of your godlike powers and that's the first thing you have to say? Venti's whole thing is being carefree, but he really doesn't seem like someone who sees losing his Gnosis as a huge problem. You'd think he'd be doing more to try and get it back, you know? Clearly the Archons of Teyvat do not care for the Divine. In fact, they seem somewhat opposed to it. Giving Tsaritsa their Gnosis is essentially a win-win for them. By giving it up, they sever their connection with Celestia, something which erodes their personality in exchange for power, which it turns out they don't even need. Plus, if Tsaritsa is successful in taking down the Divine, these heavenly principles, then the Archon don't have to be worried about them coming down and ending humanity, the people that they've sworn to protect and have actually grown quite fond of. Why else would Zhongli fake his own death just so he can hang out with mortals? We know that out of the 7 major regions, Tsaritsa's is going to be the last one that we visit in the main storyline, so it would make a ton of sense if the climate.
Huh, so is it not Tsaritsa we're seeing next, or is it the Hydro Archon we're seeing next? It's either Cryo or Hydro we're seeing next. Either way, I'm excited to see the new region. It'll be a while before it comes, though, sadly.
Climax of the story was some epic team-up event, where Tsaritsa, with all 7 Gnosis in hand, finally leads her rebellion against the Divine, with all the other regions of Teyvat supporting her, allowing the residents to finally live in peace without the fear of divine intervention. At first glance, it might seem like this is a story all about a supervillain trying to acquire 7 artifacts just to become the most powerful, but I think that Tsaritsa might end up proving to be Genshin Impact's biggest and most important hero. But hey, thanks again to Genshin Impact for sponsoring this video. This is the second time that we've jumped headfirst into lore.
Okay, so they didn't mention it in this one. Do 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 do. He's covered a lot of things. Alright, hold on one second. Alright, we're going to switch to VTuber for a second because there's a specific video I want to pull up, and sometimes thumbnails can be wacky, so give me a minute. Let's see.
With other stuff, I'm...
Alright, found it. This is the video I was looking for. Alrighty. There we go. This video mentions the thing that I have a theory about. But yes, let's watch together, chat.
Genshin Impact is the only adventure game that actively encourages you to beat up a child each week. Spend hundreds of hours hunting in-game treasure and spending real-world currency to collect sexy anime characters with impractically asymmetrical outfits. Each with their own distinct personality that makes the Genshin well worth the gambling. There's the overworked one, the overworked one, the overworked one. Hey, wait a minute. You play one of 2 twins. Doesn't matter what you pick because the cutscenes and dialogue will misgender you no matter who you choose. The 2 of you are separated when a primo gem-shaped god kicks you in the dick, which is an accurate portrayal of the game's gacha system. Now it's up to you to find your lost sister. You are joined on your adventure by Paidamon, a sentient baconator who happens to have the exact same design motif as that god that just beat you up, but there's no reason to read into that.
Literally that. That right there. I have a heavy theory that Paimon is either that god from the beginning, or they're somehow tied to that god in the beginning, and they're lying out their ass, saying, oh, Paimon will be your guide, la-di-da-di-da. In the end, I'm gonna betray you and be revealed as the enemy. I have no basis for this theory other than the fact that when the god first appears and shoots the star symbols, it's the same exact shape as the thing in Paimon's hair. That is the only reason I believe this theory, okay? I don't have any basis for it. I know. If other people believe it though, then cool. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one. I know there's some other people who believe the same theory though. But yeah, It'll be interesting to see what Paimon's role actually is, to see if she's truly good or she is actually secretly evil.
Instead, Piedmon suggests the two of you walk around the entire planet. This is a rational suggestion, in so much as it was suggested by your rations. Travel across the nations of Teyvat, from bisexual Japan to libertarian Germany to the rolling hills of Zhongli's butt. Work your own butt off so people will finally agree to help you locate your missing twin. Oh, you saved our whole country? Here, we'll put up a poster. There. That'll find him.
Gee. Thanks.
Oh, no, don't worry. This poster's interact box is the size of a boss arena. Passers-by literally can't help but read it instead of talking to nearby NPCs or going through doors.
True! Freaking true! Oh my god, so true! Like, oh my god, it's like, in other regions, when they have this poster up, they fix the hitbox for it. But in Mondstadt, it's still broken as hell. Oh my god.
Whoops. Use all 7 elements to rapidly swap between characters to crush your enemies underneath an avalanche of numbers. Or don't, because the game has decided you can't switch characters right now because you're too short, so now you have to die. Roll for characters. Roll for weapons. Roll for artifacts. Roll for substats on said artifacts.
Ooh, this one looks good. Come on, come on, come on. No. 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 No.
Hi. It looks like you're having trouble with your rolls there. You know, you could always spend money. Just a little money. Just one money. Just 30 money for a swimsuit for this cardboard cutout. You could be the one to give these women pants. Don't Amber's shorts look uncomfortable? Aren't you tired of seeing Kamisaro's diaper from every conceivable angle? Paimon is in a menu right now. Can you shut up for like 2 seconds? I literally can't. I wonder what I'm gonna be installed as my big sister.
You know the voice acting is quality because the English actors are aged like a fine osmanthus wine, unable to reveal their role for months for literally no reason.
Okay, literally though, props to the voice actors in this game, especially the English ones, for keeping their role a secret for as long as they have to. I am super excited when Baizu gets announced for a banner because I've been wanting that dude for so long. But yeah, it's like I'm excited to see who's English voice, who's his English VA. But yeah, no, like literally, it's like they're saying. I know they're making a joke, but like NDA contracts. That's what they can't reveal. But also, there's people like La Senora's voice actress in English. We still don't know who she is. I think the other Genshin VAs do know who she is, but she wanted to keep herself anonymous. And you know what? Props to her, because sometimes Genshin drama is ridiculous, so I don't blame her for not wanting to be known.
Pour one out for Scaramouche. One day you'll be able to put that meaty Genshin credit on your resume. On that note, if you're looking for someone to voice Il Dottore when he finally shows up, my website is www.brendanblaber. Hang out with other players in co-op mode, and only other players, because when you have a friend with you, all the NPCs in the world suddenly think that you smell. Enjoy looking at another player's world and barely interacting with anything, like some sort of parasocial ghost. That is, if you could join your friends at all, since the world level keeps new players locked away in baby jail for weeks, with characters they can't even upgrade until they've beaten the game. Sometimes it's wildly charming, and other times the localizer appears to be a sphinx with a thesaurus trying their worst. Nothing but proper nouns and prose so purple that it would superconduct if you hit it with a snowball. Wow, these side quests have a surprising amount of dead parents in them. You know what they say, sire a child, die in the wild. Perhaps this lore will be a bit more cheerful. Oh no! If there were 2 gods in Liyue, and one of them killed the other with a rock, would that be
fucked up or what?
It's pronounced leeway. Lee, waste your time with side content like fishing, mini games, and the world's most cumbersome tea set as you prepare for future adventures in the nations of Sumeru and Nanoland. There's a great, big, wonderful world out there for you to explore. And the only limit is your imagination.
And Paimon.
Explore the area ahead of us later.
Paimon. Paimon. Paimon.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten too close to a red barrier and Paimon has done this!
Long live the king.
I am a girl.
I should probably tell her I'm just streaming on Twitch, right? Hey, thank you guys so much for...
Oh, that's so great. Thank you for the hydrate. Hydrate complete. Alright, let's see. I'm curious what other videos they have. Do 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 do. I only see the Genshin one. Alrighty. Well, I think we're gonna call it here for today then. Alrighty. Thank you all so much for watching today's stream. We're gonna go ahead and raid somebody to help make their day brighter. But yes, thank you so much for watching today's stream. I am so sorry that I started later than normal. But I had other things happening because I'm having a surgery next week and I'm going to be out of commission. So I had to take care of important stuff to make sure said surgery goes well. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and see who we could potentially raid. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. But yes, I will definitely keep you all updated of when I'm gonna resume streaming again. I will be taking next week off to make sure I recover properly because don't want to accidentally do something stupid and end up in the hospital because that would not be fun. That would be a big dumb. Alrighty. What is with some of the thumbnails for some of these streams? Good golly gosh. Teeny Nix is streaming, so let's go ahead and raid Teeny then. Alright, we are gonna go ahead and raid... Did it not save hello? I copied that username. Keyboard, hello? Alright, we're gonna go ahead and raid Teeny Nix. They are currently playing Fate/Grand Order. So yeah, we're gonna go raid Teeny Nix and we're gonna go show her love and support. Anyway, till next time, Overworld, this is Phantom Ender signing out. I will be back tomorrow for a Metopia stream because I realized I didn't actually finish the game on stream. So we're going to go ahead and finish Metopia and have fun doing it. And then the next week I will be taking off because surgery. So yeah. Anyway, till next time, this is Phantom Ender signing out. Goodbye, Overworld!